All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to start chapter 7. It's on exponents and polynomials. Again, this is one of my favorite sections. I think you'll find it a lot easier than chapter 6, so let's get started. This is the title for the first lesson today, integer exponents. Please write that down. All right. So what I'd mostly like you to write down, what's circled in this terrible circle thing. If x does not equal 0, then x to the 0 power equals 1. You know this already. Anything to the 0 is 1. Secondly, you do not know this, I don't think. If x is not 0 and n is an integer, which means it isn't a negative, it isn't a fraction, then x to the negative exponent, you flip it to the bottom. I like to think of it as this negative sign for the exponent is going to drag the exponent down. And once it drags the exponent and the base down, it loses its negative sign. We'll do a lot of practice with this. If it seems confusing to you, also write down what's circled in red. Okay, hopefully you wrote them down. Let's do some problems. All right, 1 cup is 2 to the negative 4th gallons. Simplify this expression. So, as we said before, this negative sign is going to drag the 4 and the 2 down to the denominator. So it's going to end up looking like this. Negative sign drags them down, or another way to think of it, if we have 2 to the negative 4th, just take this negative sign and make it the line for the fraction. And that means it goes away. So lots of different ways to think about it. Whichever way helps you best, run with it. We still have to simplify it though. We know 2 to the 4th, it's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, which is 1 over 16. But we forgot units. And apparently the S. All right. Oops, I did not block that one. My bad. Pretend you didn't see that. Okay, write these down, please. You only need one space below it or a little room to the side, but write them all down so we can go through them quickly, please. All right. So first we have 4 to the negative 3rd. Hopefully one of the tricks works for you. That negative sign is going to bring the 4 and the 3 to the denominator. Then we can just type it in our calculator. 4 to the 3rd power is 64, and that stays in the denominator. Next is B, 7 to the 0. Anything to the 0 power is just 1. Please, please don't put the answer 0 for those. All right, So C and D, hopefully you notice the big difference, the only difference, are those parentheses. In C, those parentheses mean that -5 is the base. So when that negative drags down the base and the exponent, it's dragging down the negative sign, the 5, and the 4. All of those things. Then it's -5 to the 4th. Hopefully you remember, if it's an even exponent, it means it's going to be a positive number. Put it in our calculator with those parentheses, and we get 625 being positive. Let me just type it out for you. So write this down. Negative base, if it has an even exponent, it's positive. Odd exponent means it's negative. All right, so write that down if that's not something you remember from pre-algebra. The example of that is in D. In D, 5 is the only base. So the negative sign in the exponent only drags down the 5 and not the negative sign. So the negative sign stays there. So our answer would be -1 over 625. All right, next one. So we're going to evaluate. Hopefully you remember evaluate means we're going to put something in for a variable. So here it tells us x equals 4. So in our problem, we're just going to replace x with the number 4. Give you a chance to write it down. All right, so that means when we replace it, we get, we get 4 to the -2nd, which means it's going to drag that base and the exponent down to the denominator and make it positive. And we know 4 squared is 16, so it's just 1 over 16. All right, here's a bigger one. Go ahead and write this one down. You definitely want it in your notes. All right, so first step when we're evaluating, we're going to replace all of the variables with the number that it represents. So we get -2, 5 to the 0, -3 to the -4th. Then we start simplifying. -2 stays, 5 to the 0 becomes 1, and -3 to the -4th, -3 is the base, so that gets dragged down to the denominator. We get 1 over -1 to the 4th. Sorry, -3 to the 4th. Should technically be down here. Okay, perfect. Then we simplify it even more. -2 times 1 is -2. And we know that because it's a negative base to an even exponent, it's going to become positive. So we get -2 times 1 over 81. Hopefully when you remember, we can make -2 a fraction by easily putting it over 1. So when we multiply the numerators and the denominators, so it's -2 over 81. Okay, keep going. All right, you actually don't need all of this. I just need you to write down this in whatever shorthand you want to write it in. You have not completely simplified until there are only positive exponents or no exponents at all. All right. Okay. Whew. 2 more examples for this lesson. We're good. Okay. So why don't you go ahead, write these 3 down, and then we'll go through them together. All right, so with that first one, A, we know that the -4 is going to drag something down to the denominator. Our big question here is, what is the base? The base is just what's in front of it, unless there's parentheses. So the base is W. So that -4 only has the power to drag the W down, which means the 7 is going to stay on the top. Another way to think about this whole negative exponent thing is that it flips its base over. So when we're looking at C, every time we see a negative exponent, we're going to flip the base over the line. So let's just highlight what would get flipped. B has a negative exponent, and C gets a negative exponent. So those are going to flip over that line. A to the 0, because it's to the 0 power, is going to become 1. D to the 6th, because it's a positive exponent, it's going to stay where it is. All right, so the final answer, when everything flips or becomes 1, 1 stays on top, C to the -3rd flips over the line and becomes C to the 3rd. B to the -2nd flips over the line, becomes B squared, and D to the 6th stays right there. All right. And lastly, on this page, sorry, I skipped B. Let's go back. B has -5 on the top and K to the -2nd in the denominator. Because it's to the -2nd, it's going to flip over to the top. So it becomes -5K squared. We don't need to keep 1 in the denominator. All right. This last slide, I'm going to have you try them, and then we're going to go through all the answers together. So try these 3, please, and I'll show you the answers. Go ahead. All right, let's go through these. The 2 is going to stay. R to the 0 is 1, and the M, that -3 is going to flip to the bottom. So our answer is 2 over M to the 3rd. B, that -3 is going to bring R to the denominator. When there's nothing left in the numerator, we put a 1. So the answer is 1 over 7r to the third. And lastly, C, we have g to the fourth and h to the negative 6 on the bottom. That negative is going to bring h to the 6th to the top. You'll notice with B, you have to leave something in the top, and that's a 1. With the denominator, you do not have to leave anything, so we didn't have to show that one. All right, hope this was helpful. Great job. The end.